Good evening, everyone. Late Night Mega here, and this is kind of part two of my journey through the modern format. So we're still in 2015, sort of. And I've decided to put down the Esper Drago deck and never return to it. And this was the deck that I went to after that, and as I hinted at in the last video, it's built around Shadow of Doubt. So I'm like, okay, my opponent goes to crack their fetch land, I Shadow of Doubt them in response, and so they're down a land, I draw an extra card, things are pretty good. Now I need to untap and drop something into play and start putting pressure on them. And that's where Kitchen Finks comes into play. Great creature, 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and it has Persist. So it can enter the battlefield again and gain 2 life when it dies. And so that's very nice. Other synergies we have with Shadow of Doubt is with Ghost Quarter. While Shadow of Doubt is in effect, Ghost Quarter becomes a wasteland, and you sacrifice your Ghost Quarter, destroy target land. Its controller may search. Oh wait, no, they don't get to search for a basic land card when we have Shadow of Doubt. And so, just the combination of Shadow of Doubt and Ghost Quarter, it's led to a lot of free wins for me, actually. It's quite hilarious. Your opponent goes to fetch, you Shadow of Doubt, and then make sure you draw your card off of Shadow of Doubt so that Shadow of Doubt is resolved. So you're playing your cards properly, and then use your Ghost Quarter, destroy their other land, they don't get to search, they're now down 2 lands, and you drop a Kitchen Finks on them, and that can pretty much be game over for them right there. They won't come back from that. And so I've gotten a number of free wins like that. I also really like being able to main deck 4 Ghost Quarters. It's great against Tron. Also, Shadow of Doubt is pretty good against Tron. Those 2 cards can help you kind of steal Game 1 against Tron deck, and it feels really good when that happens. So other cards in the deck, obviously we're going with an enters the battlefield effect sort of theme with our creatures here. We've got Wall of Omens. Great defender, he can sit there and absorb damage, and he's got synergy here with Restoration Angel. 3/4 flash flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get to exile a non-angel creature you control and return that card to the battlefield. So, if your Kitchen Finks has a -1/-1 counter on it, you can play your Restoration Angel, exile your Kitchen Finks, it comes back without the -1/-1 counter on it, you gain 2 more life. Kitchen Finks dies again, well, it comes back from your graveyard with a -1/-1 counter on it, you gain 2 more life. It gets a little bit silly. Wall of Omens. You can blink a Wall of Omens, draw an extra card. Really late in the game, you can blink a Snapcaster and flashback one of these other nasty things. Oh, we've got Path to Exile. Speaking of Shadow of Doubt, you can also play your Path to Exile to just flat out exile the creature. Your opponents don't get a basic land. Most of the time, you don't really care if they get a basic land off of a Path to Exile, because obviously the creature you're exiling is worth a lot more to them than a basic land would be. But it's just kind of that perception, that sort of just that feeling you get from shutting them off from doing that. It might not actually have any real impact on the game, but it can have even a psychological impact just playing them together. So that's really neat. And then we have Vendilion Click. The Click is kind of new-ish to this deck. This is not the first iteration of this deck. This is the current iteration of this deck. My first draft of this deck, I ran like 4 Wall of Omens. I had a 2/2 split between Kitchen Finks and what's the other card I was thinking of? The thing that makes golems when it enters. Blade Splicer, that's it. Let me bring that up. So Blade Splicer, it looks like it would have synergy with this deck, but from my experience, the opponent lightning bolts the token, and then you have a 1/1 that sits there waiting for a Restoration Angel to blink it and not doing much else. Ultimately, I just found that I'd rather be playing Kitchen Finks than Blade Splicer. The Vendilion Click, before it was a Vendilion Click, this slot was a Gideon Jura. What I found with Gideon is he was basically a really expensive fog. Not really... I mean, yeah, he could win or take over games, but there were also times where he just goes, okay, +2, and then your opponent kills him, and you're right back to where you were before, needing some sort of answer like a verdict or something. And then this deck also runs a 1 of Sun Titan. I always call him Fun Titan. And this deck just has so much synergy with it, with the Shadow of Doubts and the Ghost Quarters, the Kitchen Finks, Restoration Angel, and now Sun Titan. Sun Titan, when he enters battlefield or attacks, you get to bring back a card, a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less. So you can bring back Wall of Omens, draw an extra card, bring back a Kitchen Finks. When you go to attack, bring back Snapcaster Mage, Snapcaster something out of the graveyard. You can also bring back Celestial Colonnades if your opponent Ghost Quartered them or used Tectonic Edge on them. You can bring those back. You can bring back Ghost Quarter and bring that back over and over. That can make things very silly. So let's go on to the spells. You know, after coming off of that Esper Drago, I was kind of sick of seeing Spell Snare. I think at one point it wasn't even in the deck. Or I saw some other lists where people were running it as like a 2-of, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep it as a 2-of. I don't have much else to do at the 1 mana spot, and it's performed very well. I like it as a 2-of. I don't really want to see multiples of them in my hand at the same time, which is why I tend to avoid that as a 3-of. General rule of thumb for me, if there's a card that I want to draw at least once in the game, I'll run it as a 2-of if I never want to see more than one of it in my hand at the same time. Of course, since there's 2, statistically that can still happen, but it happens a lot less often than if I were to have 3 Spell Snares. And so 3 Mana Leaks, something that, you know, just simple counter. A lot of people say that, oh, Mana Leak is bad because it's bad in the late game, so it's not really good for control decks. There is some validity to that, but I have found uses for Mana Leaks in the late game. You know, you get into a chain where you're going back and forth with your opponent. Maybe you're in a counter war or something, and your opponent's trying to play multiple cards, and you're playing multiple cards responding to them, and then, you know, suddenly you can Mana Leak their next card that they're trying to play. Or you can even double Mana Leak something. I've done that before too. Yeah, it's painful, but if you're really late into the game, you know, make use of the cards you got. You can still make use of Mana Leak in the late game. Maybe not as efficiently, but it gets the job done. In early game, it's awesome. So there's that. Think twice. Again, coming off of the Esper Drago, I didn't want to run Think Twice at all. I opposed it for quite a while. In fact, the 2 Think Twices were originally 1 Jace Balerion and 1 Jace Architect of Thought. I'll pull up Jace Balerion here. He's got some synergy with Sun Titan as well. But these were slots that I wanted to have as draw slots for the deck. And so, you know, I tried out the Jaces, and ultimately I found I was just tapping 3 or 4 mana at sorcery speed to draw 1 or 2 cards, and then my opponent kills Jace or whatever. And I'm like, that's not really where I want to be with the deck. I'd like it to be instant. I begrudgingly put in 2 Think Twice, and I haven't turned back. I mean, they've been solid. They don't clog up my hand since there's only 2 of them, unlike what could occasionally happen in Esper Drago, where you just get a bunch of them all at once. and you feel bad because you're spending so much mana just to draw one card at a time. But here, two Think Twice, pretty good. Since Ancestral Vision got unbanned, I did consider thinking of swapping them out with Vision. Big thing I don't like about Vision is you want it. A lot of people call it a turn 1 or bust card, and there is some validity to that comparison. You want to play it as early as possible, or suspend it as early as possible, because you have to wait 4 turns. And once you get there, once you're drawing the cards, it feels great. It's awesome. Who doesn't want to draw 3 cards for the cost of 1 mana? But until then, you gotta kind of wait and hold out for it. Think Twice. I can play it anytime. My opponent's not doing something at the end of their turn, or I held up mana for a mana leak. Nothing's really going on. Just throw the Think Twice out there, flash it back whenever. You can draw your cards right away. That's another reason I like Sphinx's Revelation. I like it as a one-of in this deck. This build only runs 25 lands. I've felt fine with 25 lands, to be honest. Sphinx's Revelation strategy here is I typically do not play it for just X's 2 or 3 unless I really find myself in a desperate situation and really need to get some cards or something specific, or I'm going to lose. But otherwise, like if I have lands in my hand, if I have other cards in my hand, if I'm holding on to like Cryptics, or I've got Verdicts going on, I'm just going to keep playing my lands and wait for that moment where I can get a giant Sphinx's Revelation in for like 4 to 7 cards. And every time I've done that, I've just put the game away. It's a great one-of. You don't have to have it to win a game here, but it's very nice when you do get that big Sphinx's Revelation, and it just kind of seals the game up for you. 4 Cryptic commands. I still like the 4 Cryptics because one thing with the Esper Draw Go deck, you could get to points where you could just chain Cryptic commands and Snapcasters together and just kind of ride that sort of card advantage to victory. My first draft of this list, I only ran 2 Cryptic commands. I was losing. I didn't do so well. I also had the Blade Splicers in there. And I'm like, I just really wish I was drawing more Cryptic commands. So I bumped it up to 4, and I've never looked back. Like I said, I'm very much a if it's working, don't try and fix it sort of person. 3 Supreme Verdicts. I've got 3 Verdicts in the main, 1 in the side. Another nice little synergy of the deck is you have Kitchen Finks on the field, and it doesn't have the counter on it yet. You can play the Supreme Verdict, destroy everything, and then you'll still have a creature in play come your opponent's turn. And so yeah, that's another nice little synergy with this deck. Like I said, this deck is just so packed with synergy. Lands. Once again, I only own 3 Celestial Colonnades, so I run 3 Colonnades. And that's kind of where 2 Temple of Enlightenment comes in. Seems kind of weird. You don't see the temples that much in Modern. But, if I had 4 Colonnades, one of these temples would be the 4th Colonnade. So it's like I'm running 5 lands that are guaranteed to enter tapped. And the Scribe one has been pretty relevant. I've always enjoyed it. And it's another dual source, both white and blue. And yeah, that's about all I got to say about 4 Flooded Strands. Pretty obvious. 4 Glacial Fortress. I'm honestly surprised we don't see check lands played a lot more in Modern. Personally, they're some of my favorite of the non-basic dual lands, or lands that produce 2 colors. Once you have a plains or an island on the battlefield, these just drop into play, untapped, no life loss, no shenanigans, and they make both colors, no questions asked. Another nice thing I like about Glacial Fortress is it's not an island. This can be relevant if your opponent is playing cards like Choke, or you're playing against merfolk and they have guys with island walk. I just had a match with merfolk the other night at F&M, and all of the lands that I had in play were not islands. I did not have any hollowed fountains or islands in play, but yet I had all these blue sources. It was very amusing. So I was able to block his creatures the whole match. Let's go to the sideboard here. Talk about the sideboard. Here, I kind of mentioned in my last video, I like having 2 dispels, I like having 2 mass graveyard removal, I like having 2 sacrifice effects in my sideboard. Dispels, they're great against burn, bring them in against any control deck to win control war or counter wars. Relics, anything that's trying to monkey around a lot with the graveyard. I typically don't bring them in against control decks. I might bring in one of them against a control to hassle their Snapcaster or whatever, but it's never been huge for me in control decks. 3 surgical extraction. This is where the sideboard starts to get a little weird. So I run the 3 surgicals because this is kind of my answer to Tron decks. And so Ghost Quarter, destroy their Tron land. And notice surgical just says choose target card in graveyard other than a basic land card. So you can choose like an Urza's Tower. And then you get to exile all of those cards from your opponent's hand, deck, and graveyard. It's a wonderful way to take them off of Tron permanently. And once you do that, Tron is a very easy deck to beat, to be honest with you. But yeah, otherwise, what I've found in Modern, from my experience, the way for control decks to deal with Tron decks is you need to cut them off of Tron permanently and completely, which a combination of Ghost Quarter and Surgical Extraction will do that, or if you're running red, Crumble to Dust will do that. But that's kind of another thing. I can't really run red in this deck. We've got these 4 Ghost Quarters here, so that's why this deck is staying as a 2-color deck. And yeah, the Shadow of Doubts really want 4 Ghost Quarters, and 4 Ghost Quarters really want the deck to be 2 colors. So it all kind of goes together. 2 Detention Spheres. These were, at one point, they were disenchants. But I found that sometimes I just want like an answer to any generic permanent. Sometimes I want more creature removal, sometimes I want to remove an artifact or enchantment, sometimes I want to be able to interact with a planeswalker other than trying to attack them. So that's where Detention Sphere comes in out of the sideboard. Timely Reinforcements, this is obviously against aggro decks and burn. You get life gain, some soldiers. Not too impressed with it. At one point there was also, before I had these Leyline of Sanctities, Leyline of Sanctities probably, that and Vendilion Click are probably the newest cards to the deck. Using that term loosely because I've had this same deck list for about 5 months now. And I started playing this last year, midsummer-ish. So, yes, Leylands, they're great against combo, great against burn, great against Jund decks that try to make you discard. And I run the 4th Verdict because some matchups, like Elves, is a great example. Elves will come down to, can I draw a Supreme Verdict or not? If not, probably not going to win the game. If I can, probably going to win the game. So I want to make sure you draw it, especially in the post-board games. Now, one change I am going to make to this deck is with the new set, we've got Eldritch Moon coming out, or by the time you guys see this video, it might already be out. So we're going to put in a new card that I'm really looking forward to. Blessed Alliance. This is, well, as you can see, target opponent sacrifices an attacking creature, so it can basically replace Celestial Flare. It doesn't cost double white, so that'll be another nice boon to it. I can also gain 4 life off it, so what this allows me to do is it allows me to take out the Celestial Flares, and I think I can reasonably take out the Timely Reinforcements for 3 of these Blessed Alliance and have them fill both roles. Like I said, I like having sacrifice removal. It's great against the likes of Infect and Boggles especially. Because they'll play these hexproof creatures, or Infect they'll play they'll try and protect their creatures with Vines of Vastwood, things like that. Or what's the other card they use? Apostle's Blessing, give it protection from a color. So Blessed Alliance, make him sacrifice creature, gets around all that. And so I always like to have those. And Boggles and Infect, they aren't hugely popular, but when they show up, they'll usually show up for a couple weeks in a row, and I tend to get paired against them, so I don't want to be caught without Blessed Alliance or some sort of sacrifice effect. So yeah, this is the deck. This is probably what I'd say is my most successful modern deck. I haven't taken it to too many major events. I did take it to a game day. There's a different local store than what I normally play at that runs Modern for their game day, because their players have no interest in Standard, so they just run Modern for Friday night. They'll run Standard if they ever get enough players that are actually interested in Standard, which at that store there aren't any, so it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But I went there and I'm like, well, you know what, I'm going to try and win the sweet-looking Anguish Unmaking playmat. I'm going to take a deck that I know works, I know it's consistent, and I know it runs reasonably well. I'm going to take something tried and tested, took this deck, and just stormed my way to first place. Sun Titan, I've gotten a lot of questions about this. Why isn't this like an Elspeth Sun's Champion or something else? It very well could be an Elspeth. There's nothing wrong with running an Elspeth in here. With this deck, though, I don't really I've never found a reason to take out Sun Titan. Anytime I start to think about it, I run into a match where I play him and I start bringing back Ghost Quarters and Colonnades, and I'm using Ghost Quarters on Merfolk's multiple Mutavaults, and it's just silly. And that's something Elsbeth can't really do. So, yeah, Elsbeth, it's a reasonable finisher. It's a great win condition. And I would say so is Sun Titan. Another criticism I've heard about Sun Titan as well: your opponent's not going to let that resolve. Well, if they don't let Sun Titan resolve, they're not going to let a 6-mana Elspeth resolve anymore. And so you just gotta look for the right opportunity to get something like Sun Titan resolve. Sometimes you might have to sacrifice a Vendilion Click or a Restoration Angel, try and cast it on the end step, have them tap their lands to counter that, and then drop the Sun Titan. I've done that before too. So yeah, this is blue-white control. I'd call this one of the trifecta of my best modern decks. What I mean by that is it's a deck that I can just I have it sitting aside, or I have the deck list sitting aside. I can just go grab the cards, sleeve it up, and take it to my local F&M or whatever event, maybe Tuesday night Modern, and be reasonably sure that I can place in the top 4 or something and get prizes. And in fact, I don't remember the last time I played this deck and didn't win some sort of prizes in the tournaments that I compete in. So yeah, I really like this deck, and yeah, I don't have much more else to say on it. Next time, we're going to look at one of my favorite cards for in Magic, and that's Cruel Ultimatum, and we're going to go over a deck with that in Modern, as crazy as it sounds. And you're going to start to see a bit more of the crazy side to my deck building. Actually, before we go, I want to have a couple more Shadow of Doubt stories. I talked about how Shadow of Doubt was good in response to fetch lands, and, with the Ghost Quarter and the Path in this deck, but I didn't talk about other cards in the format that Shadow of Doubt is good in response to. One of them being Court of Calling. It basically says, Shadow of Doubt says, counter target Court of Calling and draw a card. And for 2 mana, that sounds like a really good deal. It is. Very amusing when that happens. It also is a great response to um, uh, Sylvan Scrying. That's the card I'm trying to think of. Sylvan Scrying and Expedition Map in Tron decks. Uh, and just anything where your opponent is trying to search their deck for something. Fabricate is another one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's at least a few more examples. And another example I like to go over is back when I first built this deck, Bloom Titan was still a deck. And so they run a card called Summoner's Pact, which might have disappeared off the radar since that. It says search your library for a green creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. At the beginning of the next upkeep, pay 2 into green. If you don't, you lose the game. So if you play Shadow of Doubt in response to Summoner's Pact, not only does your opponent not get to search for their creature, they still have to pay that mana cost at the beginning of their next upkeep. It is very amusing against Bloom Titan. Oh, also good against Escape Shift decks. Yeah, they like to search their deck a lot. Yep, that's another place where Shadow of Doubt is good. So yeah, a great and versatile card, and if you're ever in a matchup where it's not good, the worst it ever does is you go end of turn, pay 2 mana, and just cycle it, get a different card. And you can still kind of force it to do something in combination with Ghost Quarter or Path to Exile. Sometimes if your opponent gets greedy, keeps a 1 or 2 land hand in one of these aggro decks and isn't getting more land, you can cut them off of mana, and that can hurt them too. It can be very amusing, at least from my perspective. I enjoy this deck, so what do I know? But yeah, because of this deck, this is like one of 3 decks that I've ever tried Shadow of Doubt in. One of them being the Esper Drago that I no longer play, and another deck that we're not going to get to for a while. But people now know me as like the Shadow of Doubt guy at my local game shop. And so every time they go to fetch certain players, every time they go to play a fetch land, they'll look up at me and ask me if it's good, and regardless of which deck I'm playing, because they're always expecting me to Shadow of Doubt them, even if I only have 1 land, somehow they're that paranoid of Shadow of Doubt that they'll ask me if it's good even on 1 land, because they don't know what I'm going to do. I do lots of crazy stuff, like put 3 Shadow of Doubts in the main deck and a Sun Titan. So, yeah. I'll see you guys all next time.